for the next discussion that I wanted to have, which is out of all those anecdotes and out of all the experience, and you mentioned Encarta, you mentioned several games that you've worked on and very cool things. Is there any practical generic advice you can have for game developers? Are there any tips you can offer developers looking to integrate culturalization into their projects? Practical steps that can bridge those gaps, or any guidance who might be, even for the small independent one-off people that might be listening to this podcast and coding their own game?
Yeah, absolutely. And that tends to be one of the biggest questions I get whenever I give a lecture is, how do I do this?
How do I do this? How do I get that encyclopedic knowledge, literally, Encarta encyclopedic knowledge that you developed?
I'm just fortunate that I actually worked on an encyclopedia, so that helped. Plus, it's built upon my foundation as a geographer, which also tremendously helps, because geography is all about studying the difference based on where. So why are things different between place to place? And that kind of method of thinking and that approach to the world fit very well with a business environment in which it's all about market-to-market differences. And so I found that the way that I approach problems as a geographer really synced up very well with people trying to solve these problems and how do we deliver different kind of content to different markets. But for most people who don't have that background, which is most people, the main thing, of course, the biggest challenge of all is just pure awareness, which is exactly what we're doing right now. The fact that you understand that these kind of differences do exist and that you have to be mindful of it is, frankly, it really is half the battle. Because oftentimes, a lot of the projects I've worked on, and at this point I've worked on over 275 games in my 31 plus years in the industry, and on a lot of these projects, it's just the awareness piece that people need to have to understand choices they're making, not just about being, I'm just going to make this, I'm going to make that, and just be very intentional about every single thing you do. The other thing that's really important is that if you know that you're going to use a design that's from the real world, which tends to happen a lot, from a specific culture or from a specific area of the world, just do your part to, if your game is going to be representing that real place, that's totally fine. Then the challenge is accuracy. It's not about allegory. It's about, you need to be accurate, make sure that you're representing it correctly. And that's where you really need to get the input of people who are local. You can ask them, you can reach out to people in your community, especially even if you're an indie game developer. There's countless communities like the Global Game Jam community and the IGDA and all these other communities where you can connect with people from different cultures around the world. That's one of the great advantages of the world we live in today, is being able to do that. I encourage you to reach out to people and see if you can get somebody from that culture who can help guide you. They don't have to be a professional sociologist or anthropologist or anything. I mean, that's great too. You can go to a local university and get advice from professors. That also is something I would advise. But just getting the input of somebody who's from the culture is the most minimal bar that you need to meet especially today. So many games and so many creators like to leverage different artifacts and artistic elements from indigenous cultures. And that's where the huge cultural appropriation problem comes in, where you have to be extremely careful about that. There are so many phenomenal designs that exist throughout indigenous cultures around the world, and I understand why people are so attracted to borrowing them, especially because for a lot of people, these designs are new and they're fresh and there's something that's really unique. And that's all great, but again, you have to be extremely careful about leveraging anything from those cultures, and you need to get it with the blessing of the people from that culture and get their input on this. And fortunately, a lot of game companies today have been doing that, especially there's a lot of great examples where there's collaborations between the company and their team and people from that culture. Assassin's Creed has done this several times with a lot of the narratives that they're creating. But then it's just a matter of making sure that you be respectful about the approach. For example, one of the games I'm working on right now is the Indiana Jones game that comes out later this year. And one of the things that I've done is they've sourced through me a couple of archaeologists from different parts of the world who are helping guide them on the accuracy and authenticity of the sites that they're putting into the game. Because the game takes place in the real world, and they want to make sure that the artifacts and the art and everything that is being represented in the game is completely accurate for the time period. And so it's just been an absolute blast to work with these archaeologists as we're working on the game together. Plus, I'm a huge Indiana Jones geek, so that'll be fun.
Amanda, so that's cool. I appreciate you sharing all that advice.